It's recording, so when you are ready.
Okay, let me just. I'm pulling up the agenda on my side, and then what I'll do is share my screen and get started. So I don't know if Will Velodia, do you guys want to do a quick roundup of stuff that's happened in the last week at all? So we've seen quite a few skills come out of Alberto. What we're doing is we're looking at a way to centralize these skills and have people be able to submit these skills and host them centrally. That's one thing. Is there anything else you guys would like to mention before I get going with the demo?
So it's mainly this. Also now the situation has been solved, so everybody should be able to create skills and run them in competition and non-competition. We do encourage people to try it out a lot and share, and not every skill is meant to be shared with the whole company as well. So just, you don't need to do something that is clean enough to be needing to be shared with everyone. You can just experiment and have an out-baked skill that you use, which is useful for your workflow, so try it out. But if there's something that you find useful enough that you'd like it, like other people benefit with it, we're gonna have this process in place. We're gonna communicate with a GitHub repository, which will centralize every company-wide skills, and people will be able to contribute to that if they're technical enough to use GitHub, basically. And for the other users, you can just submit it to us, and we'll take it upon ourselves to do this maintenance.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Otherwise, I guess we could say that we're continuing to work on the kind of legal compliance, and we have a scheduled meeting with the lawyers, so we'll continue to keep firm updated as required.
Yeah, and if anyone else has any questions about ongoing work, of course, you can ask during this session or any time. So what we're covering today is how, primarily in FinTech and software engineering, we use agentic workflows. And what is that? That's essentially including Claude or a different LLM in our existing project management tooling and using that as part of our existing workflow. So the first thing I'm going to cover is GitHub and Git. It is tied quite heavily to GitHub and Git, and we're primarily working with programming and code and libraries. So that's where this fits. But it isn't limited to GitHub necessarily. But that's what I'm going to be showing. So I've created a dummy repo. I've had to do this quite quickly, so I might drop back out to an actual live project that we do some work on. So for anyone who doesn't know, GitHub is a central repository for us to store code and store projects and project information. I'm not going to go too much into what GitHub is or how it works because it has a lot of functionality. The bottom line is it's a remote place for us to store code and store project files and collaborate on those project files. The biggest component is that it is about versioning code and versioning project files, and how do you work in a team all on the same files and keep track of who's doing what. So to show you the workflows, the biggest parts of that are having kind of multiple work streams. In the Git world, this is called branches. So here on the left of my screen, and just shout if you can't see what's going on. Here on the left is GitHub. This is the demo repository or demo project folder, and we have branches that we can create locally. A branch is a complete copy of the project folder. that I can do whatever I would like to do on. It's a very safe space. I can delete files, I can create new files, I can really be quite free in terms of project work. I commit my work, that's saving it and syncing it with the repository. And then I can open this review process that's called pull request. So pull request just says, I've finished my bit of work. Hey team, I'd like to collaborate and get this merged back into the finished state of the project. I'm going to turn my phone on silent. So the workflow is we have the core repository, we branch off to do work independently, and then we use these pull requests to review and merge work back into the central repository. So that leads us on to, well, how do we include AI in this process? By branching off, we can tell Claude to go create a branch, do some work, and then raise a pull request itself. GitHub also has an element of project tracking, and there's a lot to it, and you can go into it. One core piece of functionality is this issue tracking. Issues are essentially a piece of work that I'd like to have done. So I would like to run a different diff, or I would like to produce a chart. I would like to fix a bug in my project. We document this, we create some acceptance criteria, try to put communication and collaboration in here. And if anyone's interested, I can show you some other non-demo repos where we have that collaboration. And this allows us to be clear on what we're working on and what the outcomes are. So we use this issue mechanism to work with agents as well. The way we've set it up, we have some background processes and background configuration. We have some templates and configuration of how we want to call agentic work. So here's just a test issue where I want to update this README document based on the iris dataset. So in this demo project, I just use a dummy dataset. It's called the iris dataset. It's to do with flowers, and we don't need to know too much more, but it gives me, I've stored the data in the repository, not something we would do on project work at Fideras, but it allows me to showcase the functionality. So I can create this issue, tag agent. I can be a bit more specific. I can tag agent Sonnet or agent Focus, or even whichever agents we want. We could target Claude, we could target Gemini, we could target different agent groups. When you create this label, because of the workflows we've put in, it triggers off an action. That action is to instruct Claude based on the issue, go and implement and solve this issue. Claude goes and does that, creates a branch, show the branch. This is the branch Claude's created. We can create more configuration to make that branch more specific. Right now we've just left it quite vanilla. Creates the branch, does the work, creates the pull request, raises the pull request. We can also have the workflow tag members of the team. At the moment, for this demo, I haven't done that. So in here, we can see that Claude has updated the README with according to a specification and created the pull request. I also have specified that we write in what the cost of doing the work was. That allows us to do a bit of tracking. I can review this, merge the work back in, and that's now in our code base. People can synchronize their local workspaces and everything's up to date. So this README is now up to date. So that's ultimately the workflow end to end. There's a bit of configuration here, and there's of course a bit of security. We don't lean on this built-in agents functionality. What we lean on is using just automations to call out to our API services and do that gives us more control. And more control means we can be more specific about the processes. We can be more specific about how collaboration is happening, and we can be more specific about security and what the access rights are. So security inevitably comes up. One big component of this is we are using API services. Most API services start with enterprise terms and conditions. These are the ones that have the best data security standards and the best protection standards and the best controls, do fine-grained controls. So that's another big benefit for us in this workflow. We also can create different API keys for different projects at track costs. For example, say we had a project for a specific client, create an API key for that. At the moment, we just do this manually. It takes about 5 minutes to set up, and we can track those costs against the cloud. Another benefit of this is it doesn't burn through your local usage. So you might be working with Claude and using up some of your usage. By using this delegation method, you don't have to do that. There are lots of different agentic coding workflow options out there. There are even companies set up to offer this. What we've gone for in software engineering and FinSec is something a bit simpler that we have control over. Control ends up coming up quite a lot. Another big component, and so what I'd like to do is create an issue. If anyone's familiar with the Iris dataset, you're very welcome to suggest something. But I'm going to ask Claude to create, my local Claude, to create some issues. Before I do that and then trigger off the activity, my local instance of using Claude, I'm using VS Code. I know most people in business are familiar with RStudio. We also have quite a lot of people have Positron installed. Positron is very similar to VS Code. We use I'm using a virtual machine inside VS Code to do the work. So one interesting component here, and some of this is experimental and part of finding what the limitations are so we can safely deploy this work if there is. What we have here is a completely enclosed environment with the caveat that I must know I'm working in the enclosed environment to do what I'm doing. The benefit of that is I can turn Claude on full automatic permissions. I can bypass permissions and just let Claude go and do what it needs to do. Whether it's Claude or Gemini or other systems doesn't matter. That's beneficial for us because it's a big speed boost, and most of what we've seen at the moment is you don't really want to be sat there approving requests, especially if they're quite straightforward, or you don't necessarily even need to know what the request is if it is going for the end goal. So some of the work
are you running this on one of the VMs, or are you running it like on a local, like you've just spun up a VM on your PC?
Yeah, so the technical term is I'm using something called a dev container. A dev container is a local VM running on my laptop that allows me to provide the isolation for this environment. So if anyone on this call wanted to do something similar, these VMs would run locally on my laptop. They're very light. They're quite different to virtual machines you'll be familiar with for your current day-to-day work. These virtual machines can be about 10 megabytes, 20 megabytes big, and can get a little bit bigger if you install different tooling, but they're very light. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm just thinking about like RAM usage on my PC, and if I want to resolve a few GitHub issues using this tool, that's going to use up the resources of my laptop.
So if you want
two different things
to GitHub issues, if the issue is well described, then you don't need your local instance at all. All the execution from GitHub is remote. So it goes off to Claude servers and it works within virtual machine provided by GitHub. These virtual machines are very isolated, part of the enterprise environment we would have with GitHub. So
the dev container thing is for you, like if you want to have the agent running locally and be 100% sure it cannot go anywhere else, you just put it in this whole self-contained little, like very lightweight VM basically, which is lightweight still. But yeah, like all of these GitHub things just like run on the cloud, completely detached from your computer.
And so can I ask one thing? When we work on projects, usually we keep the data on the P drive and just the code on GitHub. And so would that mean if we wanted to use this, the just on GitHub stuff without being local, we would need to upload the data to the repo, or is there some way we can like point it to the data?
So we would lean on databases for this, whether it's the Postgres or other database instances that we run, or Snowflake. Credentials we manage via secrets within GitHub and other management tools. We do not commit, just to be kind of clear, we don't commit any credentials or API keys to the repository. You could download this repository, take it away with you. You don't have any of the kind of critical details. You need to fetch that information from elsewhere. In the repository, that's stored in the settings, in some of the credentials stores. So for this one, all I've needed to do is put one of my API keys in here. That's here. For working, if you wanted to have some data stored in one of our databases, for example, I think people are familiar with Snowflake, then we use keyed access to Snowflake, or what we would generically call service-based access, service account access to Snowflake, and we would constrain the permissions of that service account. So the nice benefit of that is we could say, okay, well, the service account only has read access, and it only has read access to these tables of data. That would be one of the better case scenarios for working with data. Ideally, you don't want to have data on the repository itself. So one can take this a bit further, and within my local environment, give access to GitHub native tooling and the ability to create issues, manage project details. That again is done by a fine-grained access token that allows us to control permissions and make sure that any service we use has access only to what it needs. These fine-grained access tokens aren't limited to LLMs, agents, chat tools. They've been around a long time. They're what software engineering used to restrict service access across the board. So we're really just utilizing existing technologies. So if I'm doing that, I would ask Claude to create issues, manage issue life cycles, and manage some of the work. So right now I've just asked it to create another issue for me. So our workflow looks like this. I come in, I create an issue, I create an agent task. Right now I'm just copy pasting from Claude. In some of the other repositories we have, I get Claude to just do the reading and writing to GitHub directly.
One of the points is that this is not like this interface on going on the GitHub website and writing an issue is something which is not really that technical. It's like posting something to a blog somewhere. There's an issue panel, you write a message there. It's pretty similar to sending a message on a group chat saying that you need plot X to be done, and this is how the plot should look like. Except if you post it on GitHub on the issues with the right tag, we have this automation. You can put this automation that basically as an agent go look at the code, produce a new code, and ask for approval of a resulting solution to the thing you posted.
Yeah. This is ultimately, GitHub ultimately just becomes one of our kind of key bits of project management tooling. And we just want to lean on it more. So I tag the agent. It defaults to Sonnet, so it defaults to a cheaper agent. I come in my actions. We can see that this has been kicked off. You can be really specific here, or you can be less specific. In issues, you can think about them as tasks. You can have subtasks, so you can have sub-issues. Each sub-issue could go off to its own independent agent. A couple of other things you can do is via the API keys we're using. A single API key will maintain context So if it's being used frequently, it will cache information coming in and out. There are additional solutions that we've been trialing on top of that to provide better efficiencies, but I think for now, it's really, we don't need that efficiency. So I created this issue about creating this plot, having a read of the issue. We're just doing a scatter plot of petal length, colored by species. It's already kind of clocked that we're missing a dependency if we want to write to PNG, but to install the dependency that it needs. Another nice thing about these dependencies, it's not on your laptop, it's not on an operating system that we have kind of particular access to. So if there's an issue, you just change the configuration. Try again.
Is there any way to, sorry,
yeah,
is there any way to, I know it's like the opposite of agentic, but I guess, is there any way for it to like ask user questions if the way that you've formulated the issue is really vague and you don't explode the token usage? Is there any way for it to like ask you to clarify before it goes off? And
Likely it can ping back a message at some point.
can it like interrupt itself and just ping like a pull request, like please respond to this?
Yeah, so right now with this configuration, I just get it to raise the pull request. So okay, this task's finished. I'll try and use this as an example then. So here's the pull request for plots. Coming here, it's saying it's cost me 30 cents to run this. Fine. You can actually click on the branch, which just shows me the branch itself. That's actually not produced the plot itself. So an additional piece of functionality we have here is I'm actually going to say, can you please produce the plot committed to the record? So we, again, have decided on the design for this functionality. This /Claude, again, goes and kicks off the process. So you can use, kind of talk about your question, Andres, you can use PRs as a discussion point with Claude to get Claude to kind of go off, update, go off and update. So if something's not right. In my experience, it's quite limited so far using this type of workflow. Claude does, if something's too vague, Claude will prompt and just say, this is too vague, you need some kind of input. More often than not, it will pick something and go off in a direction. So it's more of a style and an approach to make sure that the issue descriptions are correct. What you can do is vet them. So something I do with the issue definitions is I get slightly better models to vet the issues. So I might get Fable or a different model to vet the issue and say, does this make sense? Does it have everything it needs to go off and be executed independently by a cheaper model? And sometimes the expensive model adds a little bit of detail in there. More often than not, it doesn't. It kind of, if you have the right template, then kind of gives itself the information it needs.
Cool. Sorry. Can I ask a question on costing? Since we're using the API, how much are you guys spending per month on this now?
$20, $25.
$20. And are you using it like extensively, or are you using it more not extensively? I'm just trying to get an idea of how much it would cost to kind of do API usage essentially.
Yes, it's my experience in the Fidelis environment. It's quite limited using this. It's cheap enough because there's actually quite a lot of cache reads and cache usage from Claude's side. We can also lean on cheaper models and and actually, for most cases, the cheaper models are good enough anyway. So using a more expensive model, you're just kind of paying for the comfort of using a more expensive model. Now, we have been trialing something called Headroom.
Mhm.
Headroom is essentially a proxy layer. And forgive me, anyone, if I'm using technical terms, just ask if you want to clarify it. It's a proxy layer between us and the LLM provider. So what it does, to find the dashboard itself, actually, that would be useful. Okay, I don't really want this moving picture. I can share the link to Headroom, but essentially what it does is it puts itself between us and Claude and provides caching ourselves. And Headroom, as a set developers, they claim up to kind of 85% savings on token usage. There are other ways to kind of optimize what you're doing. I think for now, we're just not seeing nearly enough token usage to warrant going down this route yet.
Yeah. I guess
It's also a
as
lot
we
cheaper than using Claude via the desktop and Claude via the chat anyway, because in my chat window on the right, as I keep chatting, the context window just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Whereas all of these small workflows start with no context, start with the context they're given. So
okay.
It's a new agent being spin up, so it has, I mean, sometimes you can inspect what it has in context and it can be like 10 lines.
Yeah, that's nice.
And it's very pinpointed sometimes of like, oh, look at this file between these lines, etc. So it's a lot more economical than just dropping everything in the chat.
Yeah.
And something else regarding like writing issues, etc., and making them, very extensive, is that one thing which can be put in place is you can open your chat, brainstorm what you want to do, etc., all of the characteristics you want, and then, basically have Claude or some other LLM create the issue on GitHub or give you a fully spelled out spec. So you can have that Socratic discussion thing. Okay, like I would like to make this chart, how should it be configured, etc., etc., etc. You get the full spec, drop it on GitHub, and the agent runs on the repo, and it's, goes in the data, gets back just the new code. You just check the lines of code, and you like, yeah, this does what I want. Run it, you get your chart, and you get your outputs. And it's a very natural process that also gives code review at the same time. And yeah, and you got cost. You can build cost control in. You can build cost control with like specific API keys, but you can like control the cost, rebuild to clients.
Yeah.
Like in the implementation that we already did for the software development team, like every time this agent runs, it tells you the cost, and it's in pennies, really.
Yeah.
For like one issue being solved.
And we're already doing this from a project management perspective with the consumer protection database, for example, has its own API key, so we can see like what the build and then ongoing maintenance costs are, and so we can see, is this bringing the value to the firm that we're outlaying on it. And we're definitely not being silly about it. We're well aware of the huge cost blowouts that some companies have had. So but that's easily controlled with the right.
Yeah, put some sort of limit on it or something.
Yeah. We have in place.
Because I'm only using Paper 5 personally.
You're only using Paper 5?
Yeah.
They're going to stop you from doing that.
Yeah.
It's great. This guy is super smart.
30 steps. So yeah, there's a little bit of control there. Also, by breaking tasks down, you get better control of the costs. So something about that, producing the plot. We haven't actually saved the plot itself. It's written the code to produce the plot, but it hasn't necessarily run it or added the plot to the repository. When trying to get it to go again, actually the GitHub action itself is waiting for availability. That's really interesting. I haven't actually seen that before, so I don't know if that's something to do with the way I've set up this demo repository. But what I've done instead is just ask my local Claude to switch the branch and finish off. But it's going to get stuck actually looking at what it's doing, it's going to get stuck because I haven't given it permission to do this yet. So I'll stop that. But what I can do is I can manually check out the
Execute the code.
Now, I think a lot of this you'll see is the Git workflows.
In terms of setup, this is still a bit involved because you have to set up everything with GitHub, etc. But they rolled out the features recently for Slack, which is an equivalent of Teams that we don't use. So it's likely that we're gonna get an equivalent in Teams. So which is called Cloud Tag, where basically when you write a message on group chats, you can literally just do @Claude as you would somebody else and give it instruction, and then it can do things where it's been permissioned. So you could, for example, maybe in a few months get a setup where you can literally just in the project chats, once the discussion lands to a stage of like we need to do this, simply do @Claude with a message to do it, and it's just gonna go and act on the repos and make the project go forward.
So I actually found it's gone into an error itself trying to produce the plot. It's chosen the wrong library to use. That's more of an involved challenge. What I'm going to show you then is I've used something for people to be aware we're rolling out economy in the business. I've used one of the economy repos as a way to. I've used this methodology in this repo. So one of them was creating a service diagram of the data flow in economy. So it's exactly the same process. Written an issue. I can go to this issue, definition, structured, it follows the same structure I'm expecting, added the label agent, and then in the pull request, I have the cost, 14.15 cents, and files changed, and then I can go and this has already been merged, so we've approved the changes, we've said, yes, those changes are correct, and I can come into my documentation and see the diagram that we've created. So one element of this is I know we get a bunch of code on competitions projects. You might want to know what is the data flow, what are the connections in the code. And I'm surprised this is not filling the screen. But this is the flow of data in the current economy project. So we have data sources, a couple of data sources that we don't use, pulling these FX rates, putting them into a standardized model. These are the rates we actually pull. This is the main component of the service. We do some logging to what's called standard out and teams. We actually log some information to teams for the dev team, so the dev team can see what's going on. And then we push this FX information directly to economy production and economy's sandbox environment, which I've called integration here. So if you had something similar, you can draft the issue. Say, I want to know exactly how this code works, what the connections are, and you don't necessarily want to dig through yourself. You can use this issue-based method. I can show you the issue that was used again. This is the issue. I can actually show you the workflow. So we did this as a test. It took 4 minutes to implement the issue, and then we get those diagrams back on the documentation. think the key thing for us is it's all versioned, it's all permissioned properly. We know we can approve changes, disapprove changes, or reject changes. Ultimately, that's the workflow. So I could kind of keep going. We've built this very much from a kind of software engineering focus. It can be used project-based, and I'd be interested to know if people wanted to start using this for less software-related tasks. I'll share around the headroom documentation. Ultimately, as a goal for us, we would host a lot of this stuff centrally, and so people wouldn't really need to worry about this, that they need to configure any of this. And in terms of configuration of projects, we standardize that as well. So we just reuse the configuration project by project. For some of the projects we have, we copy paste that configuration. For a couple of the projects I have on here, I actually pull that configuration as a link between projects. So if I update the definitions project, the templates, then that's automatically updated to my other projects. It's really all just about automating a lot of the processes. Yeah, just have a quick look at the agenda we wrote to see if we wanted to cover anything else. So a couple of points about this dev container environment. This is really important if we want to reproduce work. So every time I open this environment, the virtual machine that's running, I can destroy it, I can break it, I can do whatever I need to do, and that's fine. It takes a few minutes to just recreate the whole environment from scratch. So this is really good for reproducibility. If we want to work in a consistent environment, if I want to be working on something and I want to know everybody is working in exactly the same environment as me, then we can be confident that that's the case here. If we're deploying code into cloud services and I want to check something, check an error, see why something's not working, by working in this container environment, I know I'm working in exactly the same environment that the deployment's working in. And that helps us avoid wasting time. Maybe there's an environment difference, maybe there's some kind of permissions difference. So it's really that it's very reproducible and gives us a lot of safety, avoids permissioning issues. Claude inside my environment here can't go off and touch the P drive or anything like that. In software engineering, we work in a zero trust perspective. So any code we work with starts with no permissions. You add permissions as you go. Very similar to the way Snowflake permissions work. And it's versioned. So if we want to go back to a particular version at a point in time, we can do that. Some of the ways we maintain versions, I'll show you, is with something called releases. So we tag these and we say what's happened for this version, and we give it a version number. You don't need to use a number. You could say, client results or specific output, or it's a free text field, so you can put whatever you want there. We'll use again consistency in templates to make sure that stays on track for us. That's versions. So that kind of covers it. There's a lot of configuration.
Is that different to tags? Releases? Because we're like tagging stuff now, I think.
Yeah. So in FinSec, we tag work. Tags and releases are kind of joined. So tags are the Git terminology. Releases are GitHub specific. So the releases rely on tags. Ultimately, all of this is metadata that points to this version history. That's all it does.
Yeah, okay. It's the same then.
I appreciate I've gone over quite a lot of stuff. A lot of it might be quite software engineering related. Does anyone have any other questions? Maybe questions about how it might fit into work you're doing, or I appreciate it's not necessarily going to fit into every piece of work, but.
I had a quick question. When you're running this agentic thing, is it like sandboxed in the same way as it would be like with our Claude code and stuff like that? Like, is there any risk that it's like doing this not privately?
So it is sandboxed.
Okay.
So it depends what you would like the limits of the sandbox to be. So for when I say these actions go off and run on a virtual machine, for some of the work we have, that virtual machine is actually owned by Federas. For a couple of the repos we have, that computer is actually the BPG laptop. But that's specifically where we want something to be happening on the BPG laptop. For example, it's our Bloomberg API or something similar. So you have, like, I won't show you the configuration, but you can be quite specific. As soon as you're being specific about where it's running, you have full control over the environment. So you can either leave it within the GitHub environment, that's sandboxed enough for most tasks, or we could provision specific resources on Azure, and we could block network access, allow inbound traffic only, for example, except for the LLM. Yeah, there's kind of full control.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So ultimately, the goal of this approach is that we can document work coming in more and delegate that work. So there's a lot of simpler tasks that we don't necessarily need to spend time on ourselves. We know would be appropriate for just throwing at Claude or throwing at a similar service. And this methodology, this approach, allows us to do that and just keep throwing work out, and also find the limits of it. I think that pretty much covers it. Okay, well,
Should we throw out to wider questions or concerns?
yeah, anything else wider about Claude or AI usage or confidentiality? Go for it. Just go for open Q&A now.
Is there an inbuilt cost limit? So if I start using this agentic guy, there's no risk that I will just like run it overnight and it uses up a ton of money?
Yeah, so for the current workflow we have, it's only allowed to do 30 steps.
Okay.
Limits not only the cost, but what it's capable of doing. But you can also put limits on the API key itself. So I think the Federas organization is only allowed to spend $500 a month on the API keys total. So that's just a limit that we force.
Which include like actual like projects that use API keys.
Yeah, exactly.
Only this one, yeah.
Have people been exploring with the skills since last Thursday with the workshop on skills? Has anyone been using the Federas chart skill that Alberto mainly used?
Yeah, I've been using that. And I flagged an issue that maybe the agentic guy could solve.
I didn't use it. I didn't try to install it. I have to.
It's pretty good, but I feel like now we have Gamma, we have Claude Design, and we have this skill. Is there any like future idea to harmonize all this stuff? And of course we have Federify, so that's like 4 distinct branding.
Yeah, it has to stay consistent. It has to be rationalized.
It's probably not a question for you guys, but
Yeah,
No, but yes.
so I think we're still in a tool discovery phase. So Gamma has been the tool of use. Claude Design is just being released. We're exploring the advantages and disadvantages of both, but all of it should always tie back to the Fideris branding guide. So things, it should always be the same colors, so same fonts, same way we make charts. On Gamma, when we make a chart, it's still being Fiderified in Excel or wherever you're building it. So if you're noticing differences to the eye, do call that out. Because at the moment they should all be different ways of getting to the same output. But yes, we do need to make sure there's consistency.
To the sort of thing of, allowing people to show the tool works best as well, because we do also verify plots in Excel, in ggplot2 and in matplotlib, which are, 3 different standards that can all diverge from each other. Oh,
Is there anything before we let you go, anything that anyone particularly wants to see in one of these sessions coming up soon? Nothing you've seen online or read about and thought that would be cool to know more about? Take that as a no.
dropping things in the chat if you do have suggestions. Cool. I think I can free everybody from.
Yeah. There are no other questions. I'm happy.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks all for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.